Bread away from not talking. She called me up out of the blue and said,
Those are the best kind of angels. Next to the suggestion is there is a enjoy talking about it. Yeah, it's like golden.
hey folks, can I get your attention, please? Wonderful. So this next session is called Powerlunching and Networking. So you're going to learn today about the lifeblood of the technical industry, which is recruiting. All right, these are the folks that find you, find the jobs, and hook you up. All right. Now, there's good and bad elements to this industry. You need to know the differences between the ethical and unethical recruiters, and very much so, you need to know the difference between internal and external recruiters. So the woman that I've brought before you today is a woman who has personally placed me in some lovely and highly lucrative positions. Shannon Anderson has a long history working at Microsoft as, I believe you were the head recruiter for Microsoft.
At one point.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's worked on her own, started her own companies, worked for, I think it was Ignition Partners once as a head technical recruiter, been the vice president of recruiting before. I think this was at one of the previous firms that you had done. So absolutely. And right now she's representing something like 30 companies in terms of top level and executive level technical recruiting. This is a woman y'all want to know, okay? Shannon Anderson is also a friend of mine. I've enjoyed her company, and she called me up out of the middle of nowhere. Remember that Google thing that I told you about with your text-based resume online? That's how this happened. So learn the lesson for the future, folks. And I'm going to turn this over to Shannon, who's got some remarks for you. And she's going to teach you more about what you need to know to get jobs from her.
So thank you, Tara and Liz and Lorraine, for inviting me here, Lady Coders. I think that the charter of Lady Coders is something I have a lot of passion about, and I'm very supportive of what you're doing. And I hope that this is a kind of a reoccurring event. So thank you for inviting me. As Tara said, I'm an executive recruiter and a technical recruiter. I've been in this business for 25 years. I started my career as an agency recruiter, what we call an external headhunter, in the Bay Area. And then Microsoft recruited me to come and join the corporation in 1991. And I spent 10 years at Microsoft recruiting people for our company and also filtering a lot of people out. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then I spent 4 years at a venture capital firm recruiting for startup companies on behalf of the investors. So that was an interesting thing to do, because I went from a 40,000 person company to working with 1 or 2 person startups in some cases, helping them identify talent and learn how to brand themselves. And then I've spent 11 years as an agency recruiter and a headhunter outside. So I kind of went full circle. I have recruited everything from a VP of engineering at Google to a person who was 2 years, a young woman who was 2 months out of college, placing her into her first job ever. So I've kind of all up and down the stack, if you will. The most common theme in my career is I've always done technical recruiting. So I'm either recruiting engineers or program managers or testers or executives, but all of them down that stack. So that's me. What these ladies asked me to talk about today is really what is the difference between an internal recruiter and an external recruiter, and what motivates each of those types of recruiters and how to work with them. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. First of all, has anybody here ever worked with a recruiter or been involved in a job search where a recruiter was helping you? Okay, great. Almost everybody. How many of those any of you experienced a very positive interaction when that happened?
Other than you?
Other than me? Okay. So have most of your experiences been somewhat negative? Okay. What kind of negative experiences have you had? I'd love to hear about that.
Recruiters being probably a little overly aggressive to get me and stretching the truth.
So misrepresenting.
Yes.
Okay. embellishing. Yes.
I had a Microsoft recruiter. They would send me things about Google and how they were doing poorly and whatnot.
Right, sort of like the presidential debate. Kind of bashing your opponent. Okay.
I've gotten calls at 5 o'clock in the morning from recruiters in New Jersey. The city that I'm in is on my resume.
Okay. I see. So there, yes, go for it.
I had a very simple experience of just getting called into jobs where I was not qualified and then getting embarrassed.
Okay. Very common. Okay, wow, this is bad. I don't know why you guys even are having,
Because you were the one
rocks
I
at me.
thought of who was awesome.
Yes.
So ethical, that's the difference though, she's ethical. And that's why you're talking.
Yes. Yes.
One experience I had is that I was also looking by myself on my own,
Yes.
and he was asking me like, "Oh, where do you find it? What is the name of the person that you went to interview with?" He was trying to get contacts of other companies that are looking for them.
So he was using you as a way to get business for himself
Yeah.
and then to introduce candidates that might compete with you for that job.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, obviously, it was many calls.
Okay. So it sounds like there's been a lot of negative experiences with recruiters. And I guess in a way that makes me feel better because I do stand out in the crowd. I also want to say that not all recruiters are slimy, unethical, and even the ones where you might have a bad experience, they're human beings that I don't really think that most of them are intending to be hurtful, but they do have a lot of power in your career. And I think recruiters can be very helpful if you pick the right one. So I wanted to go ahead and just talk a little bit about the difference between internal and external. An internal recruiter is somebody that works for a company and represents just that one single company. Come on, this is fun. We're talking about. So internal recruiter represents one single company. The main thing that you should know about internal recruiters is that their motivation is to hire the single best person for a job. And they spend most of their time filtering everybody else out. For example, when I was at Microsoft, we probably got 10,000 resumes a day. So I had to become very fast and sharp at filtering out resumes, looking very quickly, no, yes, maybe. And so my whole job was based on filtering out, and that's something very important that you should know. The other thing is internal recruiters are not paid based on whether you accept a position with their company. They're paid to maybe even have fewer hires rather than more. It's all about quality. And they're measured on things like, did the candidate that you hired for job A, did that candidate perform well? Were they promoted? Were we able to retain the candidate? So recruiters have a lot of motivation to keep anybody out that isn't going to be perfect for that job. Right. So that's something to really pay attention to. But they're also salespeople for their company. They're great at, they should be great at facilitating the process and making sure that you're interviewing with the right people and that the interview process is giving you fair opportunity to, to express your skills and talents. So they have a wonderful opportunity to make the right thing happen for both sides. And most of the corporate recruiters I work with are excellent at that, especially at the larger companies. External recruiters, otherwise known as headhunters or agency recruiters, that's what I am now. Agency recruiters have kind of the opposite motivation. Agency recruiters get paid when you take the job that they're presenting to you, or when anybody takes the job that they're presenting to you, meaning you're not the only person that they're talking to about a job. And in fact, they're introducing competition every time they submit another candidate for the role. In addition to you, they're introducing competition. And they're not going to tell you that, but that's their business model. Their motivation is to filter in as many people as they can. So they love to submit 30 candidates, because then just statistically, the chances of them filling that job with one of those 30 people is very high. So when you're working with an agency recruiter, keep in mind that they are going to act in their own self-interest, just like everybody else does. and you are not going to be the only person that they're talking to for the job. On the other hand, agency recruiters can, on the positive side, they can introduce you to lots and lots of opportunities that you can't get on your own, probably because either you haven't found them or the jobs aren't advertised, or they might have a relationship with a company that gets you considered for a job that they don't have, that they might create a job for you. So that's a wonderful thing. Also, the external recruiters are skilled negotiators, and they can help you make sure you get the right salary, and they're motivated to get you the highest salary possible because their fee is based on how much you make. So if you land a job for $100,000 a year and you do it through a recruiter, the recruiter is probably going to make 20% of your base salary as their fee. They'll be paid $20,000 for getting you hired. So they're highly motivated. The higher your salary, the higher their fee. One thing that there is a misperception about recruiters, external recruiters, the fee that they earn never comes from your pocket. You don't write them a check. They don't take money out of your check as a percentage. That percentage, that fee that recruiters are paid is literally a separate budget for the company. And they budget that out and they pay us through a separate line item and everything. So sometimes I'll talk to candidates on the phone and they think that I'm going to make them pay me. And so that's one of the red flags we'll talk about in a minute. But if a recruiter indicates that you're going to have to pay the fee or it's coming out of your salary, run, because there's something wrong with that situation.
Do the external recruiters talk to the internal recruiters to do the negotiation?
Yes, great question. So you might ask, why would a company hire an external headhunter when they have a perfectly good recruiter in-house? And the answer to the question is, usually the positions that they ask headhunters to fill are harder to fill, maybe beyond the capacity of the internal team, or the volume of positions is so high that they just need to outsource it to headhunters to help get candidate flow. In the ideal situation, my clients call me when they have a position that they haven't been able to fill through their networks and their job postings and their own efforts, and that they really are desperate for help, because that makes them a good client for me because they need me. And ideally, the internal recruiter and the external recruiter are partners and working together and working in concert to find the best and to make sure that the interview process is very clean. Nice thing about working with an external recruiter in that situation is you've got an advocate for you that's helping make sure that you're at the top of the mind of the internal recruiter who, is busy and who also isn't getting paid to hire you. So the external recruiter can be kind of pushy and kind of push things up. The external recruiter can be so pushy, however, that it ends up reflecting badly and poorly on you. So, all of these things have their pluses and their minuses,
So if they have more than one candidate that they're advocating for, is there anything you need to do to be their favorite?
Yes. Yes.
Box of chocolates?
Yes. I'll hit on a few more points on that in a minute, but I will say that the way to become the favorite is to be super responsive to the recruiter, answer every question that they have for you about your salary and what you will and won't take. And when you finish the interview, call the recruiter right away and tell them what it was like. Tell them who you met with. Tell them what you thought. Tell them what questions were asked. Give them everything. Let them know if you want the job. If you do, tell them that you'll fight hard to get it. When the recruiter gives you advice about what to wear, about what to say, about what to ask, then take their advice and be a good client to them, and you will very quickly rise to the top of their favorite list. Yeah. In fact, I'm already liking you because you asked that question. Go for it.
I'd like you to give everyone some advice on what to do if the company offers to cut the recruiter out of the picture instead of paying the recruiter. Awesome.
That's a very interesting question. if a company asks you to do something unethical, like cut your recruiter out of the deal, then that's a red flag about the company and about the person in the company that asked you to do that. It's illegal and unethical, and it would never hold up in any sort of a courtroom, situation. I mean, the lawyers here can tell you more. A lot of that stuff isn't worth litigating, but it's illegal. But if it happens where you feel like you aren't going to get the job unless you compromise your ethics, then I think it's important to decide what's more important to you and go down that path. But really, I would say talk to the recruiter. Let the recruiter know that this request has been made, that you're feeling compromised, and let the recruiter handle it, okay? You always want to let the recruiter handle it. Because they have as much to lose as you do. Well, not really. You have a career at stake. It's just a fee for them. But it's their reputation and their business, so it's absolutely their problem to solve, not yours.
And you want to still be recruitable as well. You can get blackballed for doing this by all technical recruiters.
Thank you. You can get blackballed, if you do that.
Can I ask you to elaborate? You had mentioned previously that money never comes out of the pocket of the person getting the job. I frequently work with vendor agencies that are a non-disclosure firm, in which case the amount of money they're getting paid is never getting told to me, and my company is also my recruiter. So I'm not negotiating with that company, I'm negotiating with my vendor agency, and as a result, money that they're getting does come out of my pocket because the amount of money they pay me needs to be minimized. So can you explain the difference between the external recruiter and the vendor agency in the situation in which money is coming out of your pocket? What's going to the recruiter?
Well, I have to say, Tara, you know more about this than I do, really, because you've been, on the side of somebody taking money out of your paycheck. My firm doesn't work that way, so I have less visibility. So my firm, this is an exact conversation that Tara and I had when she was starting to work for my client. She asked me, how much are you making off of me? And I told her. And she said, well, how much of what I earn am I going to have to give up in order for you to make that fee? And I said, nothing. You tell me what you want to make, and then I will make my fee on top of that. So I mark Tara up. So let's just say her fee was $100 an hour. I like to use 100 because I'm not a mathematician, so like some of the people in the room. So let's say her take home, her pay rate, we call it, is $100 an hour. Then I mark that up 50%, and I charge the company $150 for every hour that Tara works, and Tara takes home 100 of it, and then the 50 that I make isn't really going directly in my pocket. It's paying for her payroll taxes. It's paying for, all of the other liabilities, all of the other things that I have to have in order for Tara to be on my payroll. And then after that is profit. I also have to pay myself and my team, and there's quite a few people we have things like a building that we have to facilities. So after that comes our profit. So that's the answer to the question, to the best that I can answer it. Some agencies, if let's just say the company's paying them $100 an hour for Tara, then I try to get Tara down as low as I can. Say, Tara, we're only going to pay you $50 an hour.
Actually, that's happened before, and the number was 42.
42, okay. So, right. So sometimes companies, my clients will say to me, well, we're only going to pay $100 an hour for this person total. That means you have to get the contractor to take the lowest amount that you can in order that your profit is basically made up on their back. And when I have a client like that, I tell them that our markup is 50% and that we will find somebody who's willing to work for $50 an hour, but it's going to be fair. And I take it out of my profit if that person needs to make more. So I don't take it out of the hide of the contractor. That's probably not a great way for me to get rich, but that's the way I do it. And so if you're working with a recruiting agency that won't tell you what their markup is, or they won't tell you what the company's paying them, it's called a bill rate. If the recruiter won't tell you what the bill rate is versus the pay rate, bill rate's the big number, pay rate's what you take home, then don't work with them. Don't work with them. I know a lot of contractors that make $45 an hour. I can get them $80 an hour for the work that they do. And I still make my markup. I still make the money I need to make. So there's a lot of extra money, a lot of skimming, and that's unethical. But like I said, Tarah knows more about it firsthand. I've never worked for a firm like that. I just can't imagine doing that. That's gross to me. But that's most contract agency firms work that way.
The rule of thumb on this is when I said full disclosure versus non-disclosure, those are the terms you're looking for. Remember these terms: full disclosure and non-disclosure, and bill rate versus pay rate. Those are the two key pieces of information that give you what you need to know. First, the non-disclosure means that they're not going to tell you how much they're getting billed, how much they're getting paid for your services, which means that you're not struggling versus the company that's going to be using your services. You're struggling with the person who has hired you in order to get as much money as you possibly can. This is not an ideal situation to be in. It's the one that I was in when I had my first major job. Okay. Full disclosure is what Shannon did, okay? And what she did was she said, my markup is 50%, and I said, given the situation and overhead, that sounds completely reasonable to me. Because she's finding me a job. She's handling HR for me, for my private company. Handling my payroll taxes, Social Security taxes, FICA, Medicare, everything along those lines. All of the taxes I would have had to handle. Overhead for the company, all of these things are handled in that chunk of money. Does it sound a little weird to you that I would get paid $100 and some person, all they did was make a phone call, gets me $50 an hour for every hour that I work? Does this seem unreasonable to you? Seriously, does it seem a little weird? All right, this is the way that the industry works first. And second, it's her job to handle all the stuff that I don't want to. I just get to work. I don't have to do all of the CPA work, the accounting, pay for my own attorney to handle the documentation for FICA taxes. It starts to mount really, really fast. Somebody has to handle that somewhere. It's her firm handling it. Bill rate is what they're getting paid for your services. Pay rate is what you're getting paid for your services. If you see numbers that start to get above 50%, then you're starting to see something that is unreasonable.
Right.
So you start getting further above that, and we're going to have a problem. So it gets abusive past a certain point. But this is a fair and appropriate rate, and the way she handles it is ethical by saying we mark up. All right, we don't take a top rate and then drop them down as low as possible. We mark up on what they want and negotiate from there.
Right.
I just have another question for you about the full disclosure versus non-disclosure. Doesn't that depend on the company that you're working with? More
Yes.
than what your policy is?
Yes. And do you mean the client company or my agency?
The client company.
No, really, it's the agency has control over that structure. So I might have an agreement with my client that the client won't pay more than $100 an hour. And so I don't say to myself, okay, great, I'm just going to try to talk somebody down as low as I can and make as much money as I can. I say to myself and my firm, and I say to the client, well, that means we're probably looking at a $50 an hour person. Is that the right level? No, that's probably not enough. We're probably going to need somebody more senior. Well, then we're going to have to look at a higher bill rate. Well, we want you to hire that person for this amount, and you can pay them whatever you want. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to find the person that you want for $50 an hour pay rate. So it's really up to me. It's my job as the recruiter and the manager of that client to say to them that this isn't going to work and I'm not going to work on your project. And so I do turn down more projects than I take for that reason. Not just that reason, but for many reasons, that being one of them. So it's just a waste of time, you know?
Can you speak to length of contract for agencies and then extensions? How that works?
Yes, it depends on the situation. Now, I haven't worked with a lot of large corporations in this contractor model. So I don't work with Microsoft or Amazon or any large companies when it comes to putting contractors in there. Most of my clients are startups and sort of, middle, like less than 200 people size. So the rules that they have are different. So Microsoft is under the microscope for how they have handled contract employees, and they have to end assignments after 1 year and give them a 3-month break, sometimes depending on the situation. And none of my clients have that problem. So all of my clients usually hire candidates for, or contractors for 30 days to 90 days to maybe 6 months, and then the contract is revisited at the end of that time. And if it's an extension, I'll usually renegotiate the salary for the candidate, and therefore my fee goes up a little bit too. I don't usually make more, but the candidate makes more. So that's how we handle extensions. And then there's one other topic around that, which is conversion into full-time employment. So, one of my candidates was at the client for 90 days, and they loved him. So they wanted to convert him to a full-time employee, and they wanted to know how to do that. Well, some agencies will really fight that, because the minute that you go off of their payroll, they lose the ability to make money off of every hour that you work. So they'll jack that price up, that fee up very high. It's called a conversion fee. And they make it prohibitive for the employee to actually get a full-time job without kind of going to court about it. So my firm doesn't do that either, but when you are signing an agreement with an agency, ask them about their conversion to full-time employment policy and what they charge the client that you're going to be doing work with. What is their specific agreement with that specific client?
I didn't know that. That's a really great
Yeah.
point. So now you got
Yeah.
3 things to
Yeah.
ask them about.
Yeah, that's exactly right. An example was one gentleman that was on contract with one of my clients. They loved him. It's a different situation. They loved him, and my conversion fee was $20,000. And this company was super tiny. I think there were 6 people. And they wanted to know, what can we do? We can't afford to pay your $20,000 fee, but we want to hire this guy full time. And so for me, the question is, I'm going to be holding somebody's career back if I don't figure this out, and I care about that. And so I figured it out. I can't remember what I did, but I think what we did was we broke that $20,000 into 6-month payments that were correlated with the candidate's continuing employment. And then that way it was a little less risky for the company. They could handle the payments better. And my boss still felt like I did the right thing for my company, because that is how we make money. We don't have any other way of generating revenue. So that was a win-win. So I think you want to ask the recruiter, what is their policy? What is their agreement with that client? And what have they done in the past when this happens? Because that comes down to a judgment issue. Doing the right thing.
And reputation.
And reputation, yes. So if you ever have an opportunity to work for a company as a contractor, but you're not working with an agency, and you're thinking, how am I going to do this? I don't really want to have my own business. Call me and I'll payroll you. We don't even take a markup on that. We take a little markup on it, like 1% over, and that's what we do for some of our candidates that we've worked with before, just to, so they get that weekly paycheck or whatever. So, we handle it pretty well.
Any questions?
What's the name of your current company?
Oh, New West Group, New West Search Partners. If you want, after this, I have some materials I'd be happy to send you guys that cover beyond what we talked about here. But I can send you that, so you can give me, or I can send it to Tara and she can forward it to you guys. Yeah.
Could you touch on the difference between W-2 and 1099? Sorry, yes. Clarify which rate you're actually getting.
Okay, so is everybody familiar with the terms? Okay. So
Is there anybody who's not familiar with the term W-2 and 1099 in the state of Washington? Raise your hand if you don't know what a 1099 is.
Okay, this is
Everybody does. Really? Okay.
awesome. I didn't even know what
Wow.
a 1099 was until about 3 years ago. Until I was one. So if you're a 1099 and you're going to take a job through a recruiting agency as doing a contract, the markup that they need to take on you is much smaller than a W-2. Because if you're a 1099, I'm not managing your taxes, I'm not processing anything, I'm literally just collecting money. There's almost zero overhead for me to handle that. The only thing I am is taking a risk. I'm taking a payroll risk. If I pay you before the client pays me for your time, then I'm kind of burdening that. So we'll take I don't know, somewhere between a 20 and a 30% markup just for that, but it's all cream, okay? It's all cream. And if I have to lower that to make it work for the client, the candidate, and the company, I will. W-2 is where you're, for 1099, you're filling out an invoice, you're sending in an invoice every week to me for your time, and then I'm sending an invoice to the client with a markup. If you're a W-2, you're filling out a time card with my firm every week, and then I'm sending an invoice to the client with my markup. The difference is probably more than anything to you, as a 1099, you may not get paid until I get paid. If you're a W-2, I pay you every Friday, direct deposit, come hell or high water, it's all good. So there's a lot of benefit to being a W-2 that you don't get from being a 1099. But everybody has a different appetite for that, so.
Is the 1099 the vendor status?
Yes, yeah. Independent vendor, independent sole proprietor, whatever, your own corporation.
Oh, well, the sole proprietor, the vendor can also be you as a W-2 working with a vendor agency who is handling the HR like we mentioned before. So for instance, like Shannon was my vendor agency, and if we were using Microsoft terminology, I would have been a V- as opposed to an A-, which is a temp. Okay, the temp is the one that needs to get dismissed and take a 3-month break after.
Yeah. And here's so many great questions.
Oh, because just curious.
Yeah, might as well.
I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how different recruiting agencies would vary with health insurance, flex spending, and other little perks. Like, do you feel like your agency would offer more of those than another one? Or would your main perk be, I'll find you a really good job?
Yeah, that's our main perk. We offer very limited health benefits. Hardly any perks with our firm because we just don't do that. We don't compete that way. We compete by paying, giving the employee the opportunity to make more and to not push them down. And we also have relationships with companies that we think distinguish us. We're not working with Microsoft and Amazon. If you want to work at Amazon or whatever, these other agencies have relationships and they push all the costs down, and it's fine. But we just don't want to do that. We can't do that. It's not lucrative for us. And we're small. My firm is really tiny, so we can't handle the volume requests that come out of the Microsofts and the Amazons. And I forgot your question. I'm sorry.
My understanding is that some recruiting agencies will offer help, and other ones
Yes,
like yours.
they will. And some of them will even process your H-1 visa. I mean, they will really, and some of them actually hire you as an employee, and they'll put you on the bench when you're not working. And so you've got agencies like mine where we're just small and we're kind of onesie twosie, and we don't offer a lot of extra benefits, but you do get paid well. To H-1B, you're sitting on the bench, you're completely fully employed by them, and they deploy you to different clients. And when that one runs out, they put you on the bench and they deploy you, but you never suffer. Like, you don't actually take a hit. You continue getting paid. So there's a whole range of those that I'm not even educated on. I don't even want to know.
Have we told you yet why, even though she's telling you about a lack of job security, a lack of benefits, a very kind of stripped down situation, have we told you why we're contractors? We get paid 3 times as much as full-time employees do, all right? And we get paid overtime, which is not paid to full-time salaried employees in almost any company in the state that I can possibly think of, all right? We are paid an unbelievable amount more in terms of real money, in terms of the benefits we can then purchase for ourselves, and we have the freedom to develop our own projects, the freedom to do as we see fit. We will in exchange never be part of the corporate culture. We'll never get invited to the company picnics. But guess what? I've had a friend who worked at a major company in the United States who told me once that if he really sat down and divided out his hours and his benefits and his stock options into the hours he worked on a weekly basis, he would be better and happier just saying, "Do you want fries with that?" I never say that. I'm thrilled. I love doing what I do, and I get paid well for it. I have zero job security as a result. Okay? No protections whatsoever.
I come from a slightly different recruiting world in my experiences, so I wasn't sure in tech. Is it normal or allowable to sign up with more than one recruiting agency at once?
I think you can. I mean, especially if you're working part-time for each one, there should be no restriction on that whatsoever. Yeah. I should also say that we've kind of flipped our business model, and I would say 99% of my experience is placing full-time employees in full-time jobs, and 1% of my experience is placing contract recruiters into contract jobs. So, and for a while there, we were really focused on contract last year when I was working with Tarah, and we've decided to almost completely pull away from that business model. Partly because the competition with the other recruiting firms is so fierce, and there's so much muscle behind them, and hundreds of recruiters just like working the phones and spamming. That our little firm, we don't have that. We don't work at that volume, and we really just don't know how to compete there. So most of my experience is really with placing permanent. So that's what I do now, and executive. So
Shannon, is there any last words you want to leave the folks with?
No, I think there was a couple quick things I wanted to make sure you guys, I wrote my notes. There's quick things when you guys are talking to a recruiter, questions to ask. Here's some things to ask them. What is it about my resume that caused you to be interested in it? Why are you calling me? Do you know anything about the job? Do you know anything about the company? Or are you just kind of rotely going through a list? Why me? Why now? What is your motivation for working with me? Why are you spending time with me? How do you get paid? When I get hired, or are you already paid? Are you retained by a company? Do you work for the company, or are you an agency? Ask how they get paid, what their motivation is. Does my job performance affect your ability to get paid? So if I take the job and I don't do a good job, how does that affect you as a recruiter? And this is an important question, especially for internal recruiters, but external recruiters have to give their feedback if you fail, if you don't stay in the job. So those are some things. And then red flags. If a recruiter asks you to sign an exclusivity agreement saying you will only work with them, that's a red flag. Never do that. If a recruiter is unwilling to meet with you in person, that's a red flag unless they're located elsewhere. But generally, somebody from their company should be able to talk to you, their firm. If they don't ask you about your career goals and what are your career decision-making criteria, if all they do is sort of focus on the money and the other sort of hygiene factors for a job, like the money, the location, things that tell them that you're like a good candidate for this job, that's fine. But if that's the only thing that they're talking about, that means they don't care if this is a good fit for your career. They don't care if you're going to be happy there, and they don't care if the client's happy with you. They're just trying to get their money, and they're trying to figure out how much they can get and how little you're willing to take. And then the other little things, like if they're pushy and they just keep pushing and they don't listen to you. Like if they're not listening, it's a big red flag, obviously, with anybody, especially a spouse. But a recruiter is like, a recruiter can be somebody that can be a career partner for you. I've had people I've been working with for 20 years that I've placed multiple times and that are now clients of mine, and I'm placing people for them. And they call me. The only time they ever, anytime they're looking for a job or making a career decision, they call me and ask me to help them. That's a kind of partnership that you want to forge with a recruiter, and you should take calls from recruiters and develop relationships and cultivate that. But you'll also find out which ones you don't want to work with through that process too, and get rid of those. So those are my closing orders.
Thank you to our Kickstarter backers, Michelle Thigpen, Annabelle Richard, Tech Liminal, and Adria Richards. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all of our Kickstarter backers. We couldn't have done this without you. Thank you.